and welcome to So This is Thailand. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Tapani Manawet. Sawadee ka.
I'm Johan Wimonchalau. Swadee krap.
And I'm Kipsan Oslobek. Thanks for joining us at the end of the week on Friday for So This is Thailand.
Yay.
We've got a great show coming up for you. Yay!
Yay, it's Friday.
And the fact that it's Friday makes it even better.
Yes.
Exactly. You guys like sport? A lot of sport coming up this weekend.
Yeah, I like my fair share of sports, whether or not actually playing or spectating, which is a sport of itself, actually.
Spectating?
Yeah.
Well, now with all these fantasy leagues, you know, you can play, for example, football, Premier League football. You could pick your team and see how your team performs against other teams by picking all the players. Premier League's pretty cool, but we actually have not got so many Thai players playing in the Premier League. I think the number is... Well, not so many yet.
I thought you guys would be able to tell me.
A work in progress, and also for the World Cup as well, a work in progress. But futsal, on the other hand, we're right up there.
Indeed we are, and that's actually, I think, starting off with the talk of the town.
We have made a really big name for ourselves with futsal. I suppose the resemblance is that it's close to takraw, and we're quite good at that already.
The best in the world at that, I think you mean.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah, for takraw, absolutely, yeah.
That's very cool. Well, the Futsal World Cup Stadium is being finished. The final touches are being added to this showpiece venue. It's out in Nong Jok area, past Minbury, and the construction used to be behind schedule, but right now it's right up there. The new futsal arena is a 12,000-seater, and it will be handed over after it's completed to the FIFA Futsal World Cup organizers. It will be completed in less than 2 weeks. And this is very exciting as we will be hosting the futsal championships soon, won't we?
Do either of you know the origins of futsal?
No.
No.
Do you?
No, I thought I was actually asking that question. No, because I was just thinking, obviously it's based off of what we Americans like to call soccer.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. But, I can only think about, obviously it's a smaller playing field. It's less players as well. It's more fast-paced, you might say.
Right, so it actually is less body type dependent. Typical soccer, as we also call it in New Zealand, we actually tend to favour big players because we need to be doing headers and so forth and so on. But futsal is about agility and speed. And so as a result, I think Thai body type is very well suited to futsal. Besides which, anyway, Thailand has a record of being able to work at record pace when the timeline dictates it, such as, for example, the Asian Games. Dr. Valerie told me many times a few years ago how she couldn't believe the night before that it would be ready, and then, boom, there it was. Or Siam Paragon is another classic example. It had to be finished at a certain time, royally attended opening, and it was. So, good news.
That's good news. More good news on the way regarding the rice and rice pledging. Well, the government is set to release 500,000 tons of jasmine rice into the world market. They're being urged by exporters and being pressured by high demand. So the Commerce Ministry, after meeting with rice exporters, has agreed to gradually release their stockpiles via auctions. Now, private exporters have voiced concerns that they have no rice to ship because the government has taken over most of the produce because of their high pledges, and that's drawing a lot of rice out of what would be available in the market. Looking at the facts and figures, they would be exporting about 200 to 250,000 tons of jasmine rice a month, but that volume has since dropped by 10% because of low supply in the markets.
Well, we've talked about this earlier in the week, looking at the pros and cons of the rice pledging, and is it actually fair to create what is essentially a monopoly by the government on rice, here in the country? And you shouldn't have shortages when you have stockpiles in excess of millions of tons.
Right.
It just doesn't really add up.
To put those numbers in perspective, we're talking about growing, I think the amount pledged is something like 10 million tonnes a year, and they're talking about releasing 500,000 tonnes. So the numbers are very, very far apart. I think at the moment, with the government strategy of trying to drive the price of rice up worldwide by using pledging scheme at a supply side and then at a demand side, holding the supply back, it takes a lot of nerve. There's no point in releasing little bits here and there other than for local consumption. You really have to hold on to your nerve and hope that Vietnam, Indonesia, India, these other rice-producing countries, even Cambodia, that they don't have a bumper year and be able to push their stock onto the market while we're holding ours back. So they will become the beneficiaries of the windfall gain instead of us. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But of course it is our money. It's not strictly all money of the government is the taxpayer money, really. And so it's important for us to keep an eye on what actually happens, because we consume the rice. We have to pay for the rice, but we also have to pay to store it, to stockpile it, and for the wastage that you mentioned earlier in the week as well, because if we're storing it at Don Mueang, that's not actually a rice warehouse.
Yeah.
It's an airport.
I think the longer you hold on to it, the
The
more
more it
the
spoils.
quality drops. So.
Absolutely, and then you have the issue, you release it onto the world market and people say, this khao hom mali is not actually very nice. It tastes worse than the equivalent from Cambodia or some other market, and the reason is not because it's not good quality, it's just old. And so this becomes another major issue as well, because we're talking about probably, if they're releasing 500,000 tonnes in the next 6 months, this rice stockpile is going to be like the butter mountain in the EU from 20 years ago, where it just got bigger and bigger and bigger because nobody was consuming it. And so they just kept stockpiling it until it all just went bad.
So whatever
Scary
happened
stuff.
to the butter mountain in the EU? Maybe we'll have to start doing that with our rice mountains.
I think they did a lot of French cooking and used it all up in one mighty feast.
Well, if you remember what, Valerie had actually made a great point, on a previous show, looking at our production here in the country and the fact that Thailand really only has 2 harvests a year, main harvests, where you look at, neighboring countries, Vietnam, they're pushing 4 or 5 harvests every year, so they don't have to stockpile because they have new crops coming in. So, if we continue with this idea that we need to kind of save it to try to bolster our position within the market, it's almost like if you look at the oil production in the world, you've got the OPEC hoarding oil to help jack up the price. That only works, obviously, if the other countries in your alliance there in league with you. But I can't, to the life of me, see our neighboring countries looking at the potential to be able to gain some massive profits in the market by having their rice in there. Thailand may find itself short.
Yeah, certainly a very controversial scheme here.
If you're a neighbouring country, you actually love the fact that Thailand's holding it back because it's driving the price up a little bit and you keep selling. For us here in Thailand, fingers crossed, at least the farmers who have a very tough career choice, at least they are benefiting from the scheme. But longer term, we'll keep you posted on how the rice pledging scheme unfolds here in Thailand. It's quite a tongue twister.
Right, now on to some good news. We've been talking about a lot of, quite stressful things, really. The coral reefs then in Phuket, a great place to go and visit when you're on holiday. And over the recent years, they have been damaged due to higher sea temperatures, which is causing coral bleaching. Lots of tongue twisters today. About 10% of the coral reefs have been recovering and flourishing, and local officials have said that the latest surveys showed a very good sign of recovery. However, they are monitoring the situation and making sure that it is being taken care of during the revitalization period. They've asked boats not to anchor in those areas and not to negatively affect the coral habitat when they're fishing. So.
Well, if you look at it, there's really 2 possible causes to coral bleaching, which is basically the coral dies. And that's why they call it bleaching. One is actually a natural phenomenon that happens throughout the world, where just in the change of the currents of the ocean, the changing as the temperatures, all this affects these weather effects. It goes in cycles. Corals die off, they grow in other places. Then you have places where here we have in Thailand where you've had natural disasters, you've had industrial development as well, which has really made a huge impact on the environment. And I know there's been a lot of projects done to help stimulate coral growth. We have artificial coral reefs. Thailand has actually recently sunk several old ships.
Army tanks.
Yeah, army tanks and old tankers and ships to help spawn new growth there. But it's good to see that it's coming back.
I think one of the biggest issues is how do we look at our marine resource? At the moment we use it as an asset where we pull all these fish out of it, but actually if we view it as a long-term asset for tourism, we would rather focus on pulling some fish out but having big marine reserves, having areas where the coral was really well maintained and not allowing ships to actually anchor there, and that would spawn new attractions. So for example, people have been talking about seeing a whale in the Gulf of Thailand recently. People see dolphins more and more off the coast of Thailand as well. And so these are actually things that occur when we look after our marine resource, and coral falls in exactly the same category. So it's a very promising sign that some of the things we are doing right, so the coral is actually growing back, but we need to accelerate the rate if we expect to get that good tourism from diving, from swimming with the whales, swimming with the dolphins, swimming with Nino.
Nemo?
Nemo.
Oh, Nemo, yeah.
Need to keep at it, yeah. So
No, I
good
meant
work,
Nino, the TV star. No, Nemo.
Hopefully you didn't mean El Nino.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Well, Tata Young said she'd got the temperature rising like El Nino. Maybe she was wrong.
Well, that does wrap up Talk of the Town for today.
That does indeed.
For the week, well, coming up after the break, we do have more on V-Talk, myself, back in the seat, as it were. There's a great initiative that's going on together with Gasisart University and the Department of Textile Science, where they're looking at pooling their resources from around the country, getting local designers out in the provinces to be able to submit their designs using whether it's traditional methods or new ones, and giving them a real chance internationally to be able to develop not only the production and the creative skills, but looking at the business side of it. How do they market themselves? How do they contact people? And they have a lot of stuff on there, so we'll have to take a look at that closer.
And after that, Kunban will be introducing us to more of the cultural aspects of Thailand with Culturally Yours.